In the bustling streets of New York City, where the fast-paced lives of wealthy businessmen and ordinary workers intertwine, a peculiar story begins. Nathan Harper, a self-made millionaire in his mid-30s, was known for his arrogance and cold demeanor. Despite his incredible wealth, Nathan had little regard for those he deemed beneath him. His lavish lifestyle, high-profile parties, and unshakable ego made him a favorite among the tabloids, yet earned him few genuine friends. One evening, while sipping champagne in a luxurious rooftop bar overlooking the city skyline, Nathan found himself in a heated conversation with a group of wealthy acquaintances. The topic of relationships came up, and a bold dare was thrown his way. "You think you can have anyone, huh? Bet you wouldn't last a month married to someone who isn't rich. Someone ordinary," his friend said, laughing. Nathan, never one to back down from a challenge, smirked. "Fine, I'll prove you wrong. I'll marry someone you wouldn't expect. And you'll see, money can change anything." A few days later, fate brought Nathan to a small diner on a quiet street corner. That's where he met Emily, a kind-hearted maid in her late 20s. She worked tirelessly, cleaning houses during the day and waiting tables at night to support her ailing mother. Despite her struggles, Emily had a spark in her eyes and an unyielding sense of hope. Nathan saw an opportunity. She was perfect for his little bet. Humble, hardworking, and completely unaware of his ulterior motives. After a few casual encounters, he charmed her with his wealth and charisma. Although hesitant, Emily was drawn to the idea of finally living a better life, even if something felt too good to be true. Within weeks, they were married in a grand ceremony, but the union was far from what Emily had imagined. Nathan treated her more like a prop than a partner, dismissing her emotions and keeping her at arm's length. Little did he know, Emily had a strength within her that would soon turn his world upside down. Emily stood quietly by the large glass window of the penthouse, her eyes scanning the glittering skyline of New York City. She still couldn't believe how drastically her life had changed in just a few weeks. The whirlwind romance, the luxurious wedding, and now living in one of the most prestigious apartments in Manhattan, it all felt surreal. But beneath the surface of all this grandeur, something didn't feel right. Nathan had been distant since the wedding. He was always polite but cold. Their conversations were brief, and he often disappeared into his office or went out late at night without telling her where he was going. Emily felt like a guest in her own home, surrounded by wealth but starved for affection. One evening, Emily decided to prepare dinner herself. Growing up, cooking had been her way of bringing people together, a tradition her late father had taught her. She carefully prepared Nathan's favorite meal, steak with roasted vegetables and a rich mushroom sauce. As she set the table, she glanced nervously at the clock, hoping tonight would be different, hoping he'd notice her effort. When Nathan walked in, dressed in a tailored suit and carrying the scent of expensive cologne, he seemed surprised by the sight of the table. "You didn't have to do this. We have staff for that," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "I wanted to," Emily replied with a soft smile. "I thought it might be nice to have dinner together." Nathan hesitated, but eventually sat down across from her. For a few moments, there was silence, only the sound of silverware clinking against plates. Emily tried to start a conversation asking about his day, but Nathan's responses were short and uninterested. As dinner came to an awkward end, Nathan leaned back in his chair and looked at her, almost as if evaluating her. "Why are you trying so hard, Emily? You got what you wanted, a rich husband, a fancy apartment. Isn't that enough?" Emily's heart sank. She had suspected Nathan's indifference, but hearing him say those words stung deeply. Still, she didn't let her emotions show. She met his gaze with quiet strength. "I didn't marry you for your money, Nathan. I married you because I believed there was something real between us. I see now that I might have been wrong." Nathan didn't respond, but her words lingered in the air. For the first time, something in his expression shifted. He wasn't used to people standing up to him, especially not someone like Emily. The days turned into weeks, and things didn't improve much. Emily spent her time helping the staff around the house, something that baffled Nathan. "Why do you do their work? You're not a maid anymore," he asked one morning, watching her clean up after breakfast. "I like being useful," Emily answered simply. "And besides, it keeps me grounded. I don't want to forget where I came from." Nathan didn't understand her. He had grown up in wealth and privilege, never knowing what it was like to struggle. Emily's humility irritated him, yet he couldn't ignore the quiet strength she carried. Despite himself, he started paying more attention to her, noticing things he hadn't before. How she always smiled at the staff, how she took time to call her mother every night, how she treated everyone with kindness no matter their status. One evening, Nathan's old friends invited the couple to a high society event. Emily, nervous but determined, agreed to go. She wore a simple yet elegant dress, her natural beauty shining through. As they entered the grand hall, Nathan introduced her to his friends, who greeted her with a mix of curiosity and subtle disdain. "So, Nathan, how's married life treating you?" one of his friends asked with a sly grin. "I heard you married someone unexpected." Nathan's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Emily spoke up. "Married life is full of surprises. You never know what you'll learn about someone. Sometimes it's more than you expected." Her calm, confident response caught everyone off guard. Nathan glanced at her, a flicker of admiration crossing his face. For the first time, he realized Emily wasn't just a quiet, unassuming woman. She had a fire inside her, one that couldn't be easily extinguished. That night, as they returned home, Nathan found himself thinking about her words. She had handled his friends with grace, something he hadn't expected. Emily wasn't like the women he usually dated, those who were impressed by his wealth and eager to please. She was different, and it unsettled him. Meanwhile, Emily lay awake in bed, wondering if she had made a mistake marrying Nathan. She didn't want a life filled with cold silence and superficial conversations. She wanted love, respect, and partnership. Yet, despite his flaws, something about Nathan intrigued her. She sensed there was more to him than the cold, arrogant man he presented to the world. The next morning, she made a decision. If Nathan wasn't willing to change, she would. She would stop waiting for his affection and start living her life on her terms. She would find ways to make herself happy, even if it meant doing it alone. Over the following weeks, Emily quietly transformed her life within the cold, luxurious walls of the penthouse. She began waking up early, going for morning walks in Central Park, and attending art classes at a nearby community center. These small moments became her sanctuary, an escape from the suffocating atmosphere of her marriage. Nathan noticed the change. He would come home from work late at night to find her calmly reading a book or painting by the window. There was a quiet contentment about her that unnerved him. She wasn't chasing his attention or waiting for his approval. She seemed happy despite him, and that stirred something unfamiliar in his heart. One evening, as Nathan worked in his office, he overheard Emily laughing on the phone. Curious, he listened for a moment. She was talking to someone named Claire, a friend she had made at the art class. "It's been so refreshing," Emily said. "I finally feel like I'm doing something for myself." Nathan frowned. It wasn't jealousy he felt, but confusion. Why wasn't she bitter or resentful? Most people would have demanded more attention, more affection, more of everything. Yet Emily seemed to be thriving without it. The next day, Nathan decided to test her. He invited her to a business dinner, something he had avoided doing until now. Emily accepted with a polite smile, though she wasn't entirely sure what his motive was. The dinner was held at an upscale restaurant, with several of Nathan's business partners and their wives in attendance. As they arrived, Emily noticed the curious glances and whispered comments. She knew many of these people had heard about their unusual marriage, but she kept her composure. Throughout the evening, Nathan observed Emily closely. She engaged in conversations effortlessly, listened attentively, and even charmed some of the more skeptical attendees. By the end of the night, she had earned the respect of everyone at the table. "You handled yourself well tonight," Nathan said as they left the restaurant. Emily smiled faintly. "I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just being myself." That simple statement struck Nathan deeply. He had always been surrounded by people who pretended, who played roles to gain something from him. Emily's authenticity was disarming, and for the first time in years, he felt inadequate. As time went on, Nathan found himself spending more time at home, trying to learn more about Emily. One evening, he noticed a painting she had finished, a serene landscape of the park she visited daily. "You're talented," he said, standing behind her. Emily glanced at him, surprised by the compliment. "Thank you. Painting helps me express things I can't always say." Nathan hesitated for a moment before asking, "What would you paint if you could paint how you feel about us?" Emily turned to him, her eyes searching his for sincerity. After a pause, she answered honestly, "I'd paint a wall cold, hard, and unbreakable. But maybe, just maybe, there's a crack in it, where a little light can get through." Nathan wasn't sure how to respond. For the first time, he saw the impact of his actions, or lack thereof. He realized that Emily hadn't given up on their marriage. She had simply stopped waiting for him to care. A few days later, Nathan made an unexpected gesture. He invited Emily to join him on a trip to the Hamptons for the weekend. She was hesitant but agreed, curious to see if this was a genuine attempt to bridge the gap between them. The drive to the Hamptons was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Nathan seemed more relaxed than usual, and Emily found herself enjoying the peaceful countryside scenery. When they arrived at the beach house, Nathan surprised her again by suggesting they go for a walk along the shore. As they strolled along the sandy beach, Nathan opened up in a way he never had before. He spoke about his childhood, how he had lost his parents at a young age and had been raised by an uncle who valued wealth above all else. "I guess I learned early on that money was the only thing people respected," he said, his voice quieter than usual. Emily listened without interrupting. She finally understood why Nathan had built walls around himself. It was a defense mechanism, a way to protect himself from being hurt. "You don't have to be that person forever," Emily said gently. "You can choose to be someone different." Nathan looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. Emily wasn't just kind, she was strong, patient, and willing to see the good in him, even when he couldn't see it himself. That night, as they sat by the fire in the beach house, Nathan made a quiet vow to himself. He would try. For the first time in his life, he wanted to be better, not for his reputation, not for a bet, but for Emily. Their journey was far from over, but for the first time they had taken a step towards something real. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of salt from the nearby ocean. Emily woke before sunrise, slipping out of bed quietly so as not to disturb Nathan. She made her way to the kitchen, where she prepared a simple breakfast, fresh fruit, toast, and coffee. As she worked, she felt a mixture of emotions. Nathan's words from the previous night still echoed in her mind. Was he truly ready to change? Could she trust him after everything? Only time would tell. When Nathan finally emerged, the sunlight was streaming through the large windows of the beach house, casting a golden glow over the dining area. He seemed more relaxed, less guarded than usual, and Emily noticed how different he looked outside the confines of their cold penthouse in the city. Here, surrounded by nature, he seemed more human, less like the aloof businessman she had come to know. "Morning," he said, his voice still groggy from sleep. He sat at the table, eyeing the spread before him. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to," Emily replied, pouring him a cup of coffee. "It's something I enjoy." Nathan took a sip of the coffee, watching her carefully. There was something about Emily that he still couldn't fully understand. She didn't fit into the mold of anyone he had ever met. She wasn't impressed by his wealth or intimidated by his status. Instead, she remained kind, grounded, and quietly strong. It was both frustrating and fascinating to him. After breakfast, they decided to take another walk along the beach. The sand felt cool beneath their feet, and the waves crashed gently against the shore. For the first time in what felt like forever, Nathan felt a strange sense of peace. Being with Emily in this quiet place made him realize how much noise and chaos he had surrounded himself with over the years. "I don't remember the last time I took a break like this," Nathan admitted, as they walked side by side. Emily glanced at him, surprised by his honesty. "Everyone needs a break sometimes. Life isn't just about work and success." Nathan laughed softly. "That's easy for you to say. You've never had the pressure of running a company or meeting endless expectations." Emily stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression serious. "You're right. I don't know what it's like to be in your position, but I do know that life is about more than just money and power. If you keep chasing those things, you'll end up alone." Her words hit Nathan harder than he expected. He had spent years building his empire, thinking that success would bring him happiness. But standing there with the wind blowing through Emily's hair and the sun casting a warm glow on her face, he realized that he had been wrong. He had been chasing the wrong things. Later that afternoon, Nathan surprised Emily by suggesting they visit a nearby art gallery. It wasn't something he would normally do, but he remembered how passionate she was about painting, and he wanted to do something she enjoyed. Emily was taken aback by the suggestion, but agreed, grateful for the gesture. The gallery was small but charming, filled with works by local artists. Emily wandered through the rooms, admiring the paintings, while Nathan watched her from a distance. He saw the way her eyes lit up as she studied each piece, and for the first time he felt a genuine desire to understand her world. "See anything you like?" he asked as he approached her. Emily smiled, pointing to a painting of a serene countryside landscape. "This one. It reminds me of home." Nathan looked at the painting, trying to see it through her eyes. "It's peaceful," Emily nodded. "That's what I miss most. Peace. Life in the city is so chaotic, always moving, never stopping. Sometimes I just want to slow down and breathe." Nathan didn't respond immediately. He thought about how different their lives had been before they met. Emily had grown up in a small town, surrounded by family and simplicity. He had grown up in a world of luxury and expectations, always striving for more, never satisfied. On the drive back to the beach house, Nathan found himself thinking about what Emily had said. Could he really change? Could he let go of the relentless pursuit of wealth and power to find something more meaningful? That evening, as they sat by the fire once again, Nathan broke the silence. "Emily, I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about life being more than just work and success. You're right, I've spent so much time trying to prove myself that I've forgotten how to actually live." Emily looked at him, her expression softening. "It's never too late to change, Nathan, but it's something you have to want for yourself." "I do," Nathan said quietly. "For the first time, I really do." Emily didn't say anything more. She knew that change wouldn't happen overnight, but she also knew that this was the first real step Nathan had taken toward becoming a better person. For now, that was enough. As they sat there, watching the flames dance in the fireplace, there was a quiet understanding between them. They both knew that their journey was far from over, but for the first time they were on the same path, walking towards something real. The next morning, Emily awoke to the sound of waves gently crashing against the shore. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow across the room. She stretched lazily, feeling more at ease than she had in weeks. As she got dressed, she noticed Nathan was already up. Curious, she made her way downstairs and found him standing on the deck, a thoughtful expression on his face as he looked out over the ocean. "Good morning," she said, stepping outside and wrapping her sweater tighter around her. Nathan turned and gave her a faint smile. "Morning. I was just thinking, maybe we could spend the day doing something different." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "There's a small village about an hour from here. I read that they have local markets and art festivals on weekends. I thought you might like it." Emily was surprised but touched by the idea. This wasn't the Nathan she was used to, the distant, self-absorbed businessman. This was someone making an effort, and it didn't go unnoticed. "I'd love that," she said, smiling. An hour later, they were driving through winding coastal roads, the scenery shifting from sandy beaches to lush greenery. Nathan was quieter than usual, but it wasn't the uncomfortable silence Emily had grown accustomed to. Instead, it felt peaceful, as though they were both enjoying the moment without needing to fill it with words. When they arrived at the village, Emily's eyes lit up at the sight of colorful stalls lining the streets, each one brimming with handmade crafts, paintings, and trinkets. The air was filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread and roasted coffee, and the sound of soft acoustic music, played by a street performer, added to the charm of the place. "This is beautiful," Emily said, turning to Nathan. "It is," he agreed, though he was looking at her rather than the village. They spent the morning wandering through the market. Emily stopped frequently to admire the artwork and chat with the vendors, while Nathan watched her with quiet amusement. He had never taken the time to appreciate such simple pleasures before, but seeing the world through Emily's eyes was changing him in ways he didn't fully understand yet. At one stall, Emily found a small painting of a tree standing alone in a vast field, its branches reaching upward as though searching for something beyond its grasp. She stared at it for a long time before Nathan noticed. "Do you like it?" he asked. "It reminds me of myself," she said softly. "Always reaching for something more, even when it feels out of reach." Nathan didn't know how to respond. He realized then how little he truly knew about Emily's inner world, her dreams, her fears, her desires. He had married her on a whim, for a dare, without ever bothering to see her as a person, but now he wanted to change that. "Let's get it," he said, signaling to the vendor. "You don't have to," Emily began, but Nathan interrupted her. "I want to. Consider it a gift." Emily smiled, accepting the gesture. It was a small thing, but it felt significant, like a step towards something better. As the day went on, they continued exploring the village, stopping for lunch at a quaint little cafe. Over coffee and sandwiches, they talked more than they ever had before. Nathan shared stories from his childhood, the struggles he faced growing up in a family obsessed with wealth and power. Emily listened intently, offering quiet support, without judgment. In turn, she opened up about her own life, the loss of her father, the hardships of caring for her mother, and her dreams of one day opening her own art studio. Nathan was struck by her resilience and determination. She had endured so much, yet she remained hopeful and kind. "You're incredible, you know that?" he said suddenly, catching Emily off guard. She laughed softly. I'm just trying to live my life the best way I can. They spent the rest of the afternoon walking along a nearby trail that led to a breathtaking viewpoint overlooking the ocean. As they stood there, watching the waves crash against the rocks below, Nathan felt something shift inside him. For so long, he had built walls around himself, keeping everyone at a distance. But Emily had found a way through those walls, not by force, but by simply being herself. Emily, he said quietly, turning to face her. I know I have a lot to make up for, but I want to try. I want to be someone you can be proud of. Emily looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity in them. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Nathan had years of habits and beliefs to unlearn, but for the first time, she believed he was truly willing to change. I believe in you, Nathan, she said softly. But remember, change takes time. It's not about being perfect, it's about being better. Nathan nodded, taking her hand in his. For the first time, he felt hope, not just for himself, but for their future together. As they drove back to the beach house that evening, the sun set behind them, casting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Neither of them spoke much during the ride, but the silence was comfortable. They were no longer two strangers tied together by a meaningless dare. They were two people on the cusp of something real, something that could change both their lives forever. Back at the beach house, the evening unfolded quietly. Emily went into the kitchen to prepare something light for dinner, while Nathan sat on the deck, watching the stars begin to dot the sky. The air was cool, and the rhythmic sound of the waves calmed his thoughts. For the first time in a long while, Nathan wasn't thinking about work, deals, or money. He was thinking about Emily, how she had come into his life as part of a dare, yet somehow she had become the only person who truly made him question who he was and who he wanted to be. Dinner was simple, but delicious, fresh salad and grilled fish. They ate together in a comfortable silence, something that had felt impossible just weeks ago. After dinner, Nathan surprised Emily by suggesting they watch a movie. He wasn't the kind of man who spent time on leisure activities like that, but tonight felt different. He wanted to spend more time with her, to continue breaking down the barriers that had kept them apart. They settled on a classic romantic film, one of Emily's favorites. Halfway through, Nathan noticed how engrossed she was, her eyes wide with emotion, as the characters on screen navigated the highs and lows of love. He found himself less interested in the movie, and more interested in her reactions. She was so open, so genuine, and he couldn't help but wonder how different his life would have been if he had allowed himself to be vulnerable like that. After the movie ended, Emily turned to Nathan with a soft smile. Thank you for spending the day with me. It meant a lot. Nathan hesitated, then reached for her hand. I should be the one thanking you. You've shown me a different way to live, a better way. Emily didn't respond with words, but the way she squeezed his hand told him everything he needed to know. She was willing to give him a chance, but he understood that trust wasn't something he could earn overnight. The next morning, Nathan woke earlier than usual, driven by a new sense of purpose. He wanted to continue what they had started in the village, to show Emily that he was serious about changing. While she was still asleep, he left a note on the kitchen counter and went out to make a few arrangements in town. When Emily woke, she found the note. Went into town for something special. Be back soon. Nathan. Curious but slightly anxious, she made herself breakfast and waited for him to return. Around mid-morning, she heard the sound of Nathan's car pulling into the driveway. She walked out to meet him and saw him unloading several bags from the trunk. What's all this? She asked, puzzled. Nathan smiled, looking slightly sheepish. I thought it was time to bring some color into the house. You've always said how much you love art and how it makes a place feel alive. So I went into town and picked up a few things. Paints, brushes, canvases. I thought we could spend the day painting together. Emily was stunned. This wasn't the Nathan she had known, the man who dismissed anything that didn't serve a practical purpose. This was someone trying, genuinely trying, to connect with her. You did all this, East, for me? For us, Nathan corrected gently. I want this place to feel more like a home, not just a house. Overwhelmed by the gesture, Emily smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in a long time. I'd love that. They spent the day painting outside on the deck, the ocean breeze keeping them cool as they worked. Emily guided Nathan through the basics, laughing when he struggled to mix the right colors or accidentally smeared paint on his shirt. It was the kind of carefree day she had longed for, a day filled with joy, simplicity, and connection. At one point, as they both sat back to admire their progress, Nathan glanced at Emily, his expression thoughtful. You make life look so easy, Emily chuckled. It's not easy, but I've learned that happiness doesn't come from what you have. It comes from what you create. Nathan took in her words, realizing how different their perspectives on life had always been. For years, he had believed that happiness was something you earned through success and wealth. But Emily had shown him that it was something you could find in the simplest moments, like painting on a sunny afternoon. As the sun began to set, they cleaned up their supplies and sat down together, watching the horizon once again turn shades of pink and orange. It had become their favorite part of the day, this quiet time when everything seemed to slow down, allowing them to simply be in each other's presence. Emily, Nathan said softly, breaking the silence, I know I have a long way to go, but I want you to know that I'm not doing this just for you. I'm doing it for myself too. I want to be someone who can love, trust, and live without being afraid of losing control. Emily turned to him, her heart swelling with emotion. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the vulnerability he was finally allowing himself to show. That's all I ever wanted, Nathan, for you to be yourself, not the man you thought you had to be. In that moment, something shifted between them. It wasn't a grand declaration of love or a dramatic resolution, but rather a quiet understanding, a promise that they would keep moving forward together, one step at a time. As night fell and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, they stayed on the deck, talking about everything and nothing. For the first time, it felt like they were truly beginning to build something real, not out of obligation, but out of choice. The days following their painting session marked a subtle but meaningful change in their relationship. Nathan began to leave work earlier, prioritizing time spent with Emily over late-night meetings and endless conference calls. Though it was difficult for him to let go of old habits, he found himself wanting to be around her, to experience the peace she seemed to bring into his life. Emily, on the other hand, was still cautious. While she appreciated Nathan's efforts, she knew that trust took time to rebuild. She had grown used to being on her own emotionally, and letting someone in again was both exciting and terrifying. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Nathan proposed something unexpected. I was thinking we could visit your mother this weekend. I know she means a lot to you. Emily blinked in surprise. Nathan had never shown much interest in her personal life before. The idea of him wanting to meet her mother, who had heard little more than vague details about their marriage, felt both daunting and touching. You really want to meet her? Emily asked cautiously. Nathan nodded. I want to know the people who matter to you. If we're going to move forward, I need to understand where you come from. Touched by his sincerity, Emily agreed. Okay, we can drive down on Saturday. When the weekend came, they packed their things and set off early in the morning. The drive out of the city was quiet but comfortable, the tension between them easing with every passing mile. As they left behind the towering skyscrapers and congested streets, the scenery shifted to rolling hills and fields, a stark contrast to Nathan's usual environment. They arrived at Emily's childhood home by noon. It was a modest house on the outskirts of a small town, surrounded by a well-tended garden filled with blooming flowers. Emily's mother, Claire, was waiting on the porch, her face lighting up when she saw her daughter step out of the car. Emily, Claire called, hurrying down the steps to embrace her. It's so good to see you, sweetheart. Emily hugged her mother tightly, feeling a wave of warmth and comfort. I missed you, Mom. When Claire's eyes shifted to Nathan, her expression turned more curious than welcoming. And this must be your husband. Nathan extended his hand politely. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Turner. Claire hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand. Please call me Claire. Come inside. I've made lunch. The three of them sat down in the cozy kitchen, the smell of freshly baked bread filling the air. The meal was simple but delicious. Homemade soup, bread, and a light salad. Claire and Emily chatted easily, catching up on the events of the past few months. Nathan listened quietly, observing the easy bond between mother and daughter. It was something he had never experienced in his own life, having lost his parents at a young age and being raised by a distant uncle who valued wealth over warmth. At one point during the meal, Claire turned to Nathan with a perceptive gaze. So, Nathan, what brings you all the way out here? I know big city men aren't usually fond of small town life. Nathan set down his fork, choosing his words carefully. I wanted to understand more about Emily, where she came from, what shaped her. I know I have a lot to learn, but I'm trying. Claire studied him for a moment before nodding slowly. That's good to hear. Emily's been through a lot, and she deserves someone who sees her for who she really is. I do see her, Nathan said quietly, glancing at Emily. More than I ever thought I could. The rest of the visit went smoothly, though Claire remained slightly guarded. She could sense that there was more to the story than Emily had told her, but she trusted her daughter's judgment. As they prepared to leave, Claire pulled Emily aside. "He seems different from what I expected," Claire said gently. "Are you happy?" Emily thought for a moment before answering honestly. "I'm getting there, Mom. He's trying, and I think he really wants to change." Claire nodded, pulling her daughter into a tight hug. "That's all that matters, sweetheart, as long as he makes you happy." On the drive back to the city, Emily felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. The visit had gone better than she expected, and for the first time she allowed herself to hope that maybe things really were changing. Nathan, too, felt a sense of accomplishment. Meeting Claire had been nerve-wracking, but it also made him realize how much he wanted to be a part of Emily's life, not just her present, but her past and future as well. That night, back at the penthouse, they sat together on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below. Nathan reached for Emily's hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Thank you for today, it meant a lot." "It meant a lot to me too," Emily said softly. "I know it's not easy for you to step out of your world like that." Nathan smiled faintly. "You're worth it." For the first time since their marriage began, Emily felt a genuine connection to Nathan, a fragile, tentative bond that was slowly but surely growing stronger. There was still a long road ahead, but tonight, sitting side by side under the stars, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future filled with love and trust. Over the next few weeks, life began to take on a new rhythm. Emily continued with her art classes and morning walks, while Nathan found himself gradually shifting his priorities. He was spending fewer late nights at the office and more time at home. For the first time, he wasn't just chasing success, he was learning to slow down and appreciate the simpler moments. One morning, as Emily was getting ready to leave for her art class, Nathan approached her with a thoughtful expression. "Do you mind if I join you today?" Emily blinked, surprised by the request. "You want to come to my art class?" Nathan shrugged. "Why not? I figured it's something important to you, and I'd like to see what it's all about." Emily hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Sure, but don't blame me if you end up covered in paint." Nathan chuckled. "I'll take my chances." At the community center, Emily introduced Nathan to her friends and the instructor. It was a small, friendly group, most of whom were older retirees who had taken up painting as a hobby. They greeted Nathan warmly, amused by the sight of the impeccably dressed businessman in such a casual setting. As the class began, Emily guided Nathan through the basics. He tried to follow her instructions, but it quickly became clear that painting was not one of his natural talents. After several failed attempts to blend colors properly, he ended up with a lopsided landscape that looked more like a child's drawing than a serious piece of art. Emily couldn't help but laugh. "I think you might have invented a new style. Abstract confusion." Nathan gave her a mock glare before joining in her laughter. Despite his lack of skill, he found himself enjoying the process. There was something relaxing about letting go of perfection and simply creating for the sake of it. During a break, one of Emily's friends, an elderly woman named Helen, approached Nathan. "You know, it's rare to see someone like you in a place like this." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Someone like me?" Helen smiled knowingly. "A man used to power and control. This kind of environment forces you to let go of that, doesn't it?" Nathan thought about her words for a moment before nodding. "Yeah, it does. But maybe that's a good thing." Helen patted his arm. "It is. Don't be afraid to let go once in a while. You might be surprised by what you find." After the class ended, Nathan and Emily walked back to the car. The sun was shining brightly, and there was a light breeze in the air. Nathan felt oddly at ease, as though he had taken a step away from the weight he usually carried on his shoulders. "I didn't expect to enjoy that as much as I did," he admitted as they drove home. "I can see why you love it." Emily smiled. "It's not about being perfect. It's about expressing yourself and finding peace in the process." Nathan glanced at her, once again struck by how different she was from anyone he had ever known. She wasn't driven by ambition or greed. She found joy in the little things, and slowly she was teaching him to do the same. That evening, Nathan surprised Emily with another gesture. He had arranged a small space in the penthouse as an art studio for her, complete with new supplies and a large window that overlooked the city skyline. "I thought you might like a place where you can paint whenever you want," Nathan said, watching her reaction closely. Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. She walked into the room, running her fingers over the easels and shelves filled with paints and brushes. "Nathan, this is incredible. I don't know what to say." "Just say you'll use it," he said with a smile. "I want you to have something that's yours." Something that makes you happy. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she turned to face him. Thank you. This means more to me than you'll ever know. For a moment, they simply stood there, the air between them filled with unspoken emotion. Then, without thinking, Emily closed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around Nathan. He hesitated for a split second before returning the embrace, holding her tightly. It was a quiet moment, but it felt monumental. In that hug, they both acknowledged the progress they had made, the distance they had crossed to reach this point. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. As they pulled apart, Nathan smiled softly. I think this is the first time you've hugged me without me bribing you with something. Emily laughed, wiping her eyes. Don't get used to it. You still have a lot to prove. I know, Nathan said seriously, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm in this for the long haul. That night, as they lay in bed, Emily found herself thinking about how far they had come. When she had married Nathan, she never imagined they would reach a point where they could share moments like this, filled with laughter, kindness, and something that felt a lot like love. For the first time in a long while, she felt hopeful about their future. Maybe it wouldn't be easy, and maybe there would still be challenges ahead, but they were learning how to be a team, and that, she realized, was all she had ever wanted. The following days were marked by a growing sense of normalcy, something that neither Nathan nor Emily had experienced together before. Their relationship, once built on convenience and pretense, was slowly evolving into something genuine. Nathan found himself looking forward to coming home each evening, not because of the luxury of his penthouse, but because of Emily's presence. One evening, as they were having dinner, Nathan asked, "Have you ever thought about what your life would have been like if we hadn't met?" Emily paused, considering his question. "Honestly, I've wondered about that a few times. I think I would have eventually opened my own art studio, maybe in a small town where life is simpler." Nathan smiled faintly. "You still could, you know, if that's something you really want." Emily looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "You'd be okay with that? Me living outside the city, away from everything you know?" Nathan hesitated, but then nodded. "If it makes you happy, I'd find a way to make it work." The honesty in his response touched Emily deeply. She had spent so much time thinking of Nathan as someone incapable of compromise, someone too rigid and self-centered to truly care about what she wanted. Yet here he was, willing to change, to adapt, not because he was forced to, but because he wanted to. That night, as they sat together on the couch, Nathan's phone buzzed with a message. He glanced at it, his expression darkening slightly. Emily noticed the shift in his demeanor. "Everything okay?" "It's work," Nathan said with a sigh. "There's a deal I've been working on for months, and now it looks like it might fall apart. I'll have to meet with the board tomorrow morning." Emily could sense his frustration. For Nathan, failure wasn't just a setback. It was something deeply personal. She reached out, placing her hand over his. "You've been working so hard to balance everything. Don't let one bad day ruin the progress you've made." Nathan looked at her, a hint of gratitude in his eyes. "How do you do that? Stay so calm when things go wrong?" Emily smiled softly. "I've learned that life rarely goes according to plan. The only thing we can control is how we respond to it." Nathan absorbed her words, realizing how much he still had to learn from her. He had spent years trying to control every aspect of his life, believing that power and wealth were the keys to success. But Emily was teaching him something far more valuable, that true strength came from flexibility, from being able to adapt without losing oneself. The next morning, Nathan left early for his meeting. Emily stayed behind, spending her time painting in the studio he had set up for her. She found solace in the act of creating, letting her emotions flow onto the canvas. By the time Nathan returned that afternoon, she had completed a new piece, a vibrant depiction of a blooming tree standing tall against a stormy sky. "That's beautiful," Nathan said as he entered the room, his voice filled with genuine admiration. Emily turned to him, smiling. "How did your meeting go?" Nathan shrugged, a mixture of relief and exhaustion in his expression. "It wasn't as bad as I thought. We managed to salvage the deal, but it made me realize something." "What's that?" Emily asked, curious. "I don't want my whole life to revolve around work anymore," Nathan admitted. "I've spent so long chasing success that I forgot why I started in the first place. But now, I want more than that. I want a life that feels real." Emily stepped closer, placing her hand on his cheek. "You're already on your way there, Nathan. You've come so far." They stood there in the quiet of the studio, the afternoon light streaming through the large window. In that moment, it didn't matter what challenges lay ahead. What mattered was that they were facing them together, as partners. Later that evening, Nathan surprised Emily once again. "I've been thinking, you've always talked about opening your own art studio. What if we did it here in the city?" Emily's eyes widened. "In the city? But isn't that too ambitious?" Nathan chuckled. "You underestimate yourself. You have the talent, Emily. I know the right people who could help us find a space and get everything set up. We could make it happen." Emily felt a mixture of excitement and fear. The idea of opening a studio in the heart of New York was both thrilling and daunting. But the fact that Nathan believed in her enough to suggest it made her heart swell with gratitude. "You really think I could do it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't just think, you can," Nathan said firmly, "and I'll be with you every step of the way." That night, as they lay in bed, Emily couldn't help but reflect on how much their lives had changed. What had started as a marriage born out of a dare had turned into something neither of them could have anticipated. They were no longer strangers playing a part. They were two people learning how to build a future together. For the first time in a long while, Emily allowed herself to dream. She dreamed of the art studio she might one day own, of the life she and Nathan could create together. And as she drifted off to sleep, she felt a quiet sense of hope, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it, side by side. The next morning, Emily woke to the sound of soft rain pattering against the windows. The grey sky outside cast a calm, serene light over the penthouse. Stretching lazily, she turned to find Nathan already awake, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee in hand, deep in thought. "Good morning," she said, walking over to him. "You're up early." Nathan gave her a faint smile. "Couldn't sleep. I was thinking about what we talked about last night, about opening the art studio." Emily took a seat beside him, wrapping her arms around her knees. "It still feels like such a big leap. I've always imagined something small, simple. But this? A studio in New York, it feels overwhelming." Nathan reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I get that, but big leaps are what change lives, aren't they? You've already made one by marrying me, even when it didn't make sense. And look how far we've come." Emily smiled softly, appreciating his encouragement. Despite her lingering doubts, a part of her was excited by the idea. She had always dreamed of sharing her art with others, and this could be the perfect opportunity. Later that day, Nathan took her to visit a few potential locations for the studio. They walked through different neighborhoods, from the bustling streets of Soho to the quieter corners of Chelsea. At each place, Emily imagined what it would be like to fill the space with her work, to create a haven for other aspiring artists. Eventually, they found a small but charming space in the heart of the city. It had high ceilings, large windows that let in plenty of natural light, and exposed brick walls that gave it a warm, artistic feel. Emily immediately fell in love with it. This could be it," she said, looking around in awe. Nathan watched her with a satisfied smile. "I thought you might like it." Emily turned to him, a mixture of excitement and nerves in her eyes. "But can we really afford it? I mean, I know you can, but I don't want this to just be something you're doing for me." Nathan stepped closer, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "Emily, this isn't just about money. This is about you, about helping you build something you love. And it's something I want to do with you, not for you." Tears threatened to fill Emily's eyes, but she blinked them back, smiling. "Okay, let's do it." Over the next few weeks, they worked together to transform the space into a welcoming, vibrant art studio. Emily spent her days designing the layout, choosing the perfect colors for the walls, and selecting furniture that would create a comfortable atmosphere for her future students. Nathan handled the logistics, from negotiating the lease to coordinating with contractors. Despite the stress of the project, they found joy in working together. Each small victory, the arrival of new supplies, the completion of renovations, brought them closer. Nathan, who had always thrived in the corporate world, discovered a new kind of satisfaction in helping Emily bring her dream to life. One evening, after a long day of work, they stood in the middle of the studio, now nearly complete. The walls were adorned with Emily's paintings, and the soft lighting gave the space a cozy, inviting feel. "I can't believe we did this," Emily said, her voice filled with awe. Nathan wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "You did this. I just helped." Emily leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Thank you, Nathan, for everything." Nathan kissed the top of her head. "You don't have to thank me. Seeing you happy is enough." The grand opening of the studio was set for the following weekend. They sent out invitations to friends, family, and a few people from Nathan's business circle who had an interest in the arts. Emily was nervous but excited, She had worked so hard for this moment, and now it was finally happening. When the day of the opening arrived, the studio buzzed with life. Guests admired the artwork on display, chatted over glasses of wine, and congratulated Emily on her achievement. Claire, Emily's mother, was there too, beaming with pride as she watched her daughter greet each visitor with warmth and grace. "You've built something beautiful here, sweetheart," Claire said, hugging Emily tightly. "Your father would be so proud." Emily smiled through tears, feeling the weight of her mother's words. "I couldn't have done it without Nathan." Nathan, who had been speaking with a few guests nearby, joined them just in time to hear Emily's words. He placed a hand on her back, offering a supportive smile. "I'm just glad I got to be a part of it." As the evening went on, Nathan noticed how Emily shone in this new environment. She moved through the room with confidence, engaging with guests, answering questions about her work, and sharing her passion for art. Watching her, Nathan felt a deep sense of pride. This wasn't the woman he had married on a whim. It was someone who had grown into herself, someone he admired deeply. Near the end of the night, after most of the guests had left, Nathan and Emily stood together in the quiet studio. The lights were dimmed, and the room was filled with the soft glow of the city outside. "We did it," Emily whispered, leaning against Nathan. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "You did it, and this is just the beginning." For the first time in their relationship, they both felt like they were standing on equal ground, not as two people bound by circumstance, but as partners building something real, something lasting. That night, as they walked home hand in hand, Emily knew that this wasn't just a new chapter in her life. It was the start of a new story entirely, one that she and Nathan would write together. In the weeks following the grand opening of the studio, Emily's life became a whirlwind of activity. The art classes were fully booked within days, and soon local artists began inquiring about displaying their work in her space. It wasn't long before the studio became a small but vibrant hub for creativity in the city. Nathan watched Emily thrive, and while he felt proud of her, he also noticed something changing in himself. He had always measured success by numbers, profits, deals, acquisitions, but being part of Emily's journey had opened his eyes to a new kind of fulfillment. For the first time, he wanted something beyond the boardroom. One evening, after Emily had finished her last class, Nathan arrived at the studio to pick her up. He leaned against the doorway, watching as she tidied up. Her hair was pulled back, a few loose strands framing her face, and her hands were streaked with paint. To him, she had never looked more beautiful. "Ready to go?" he asked, stepping inside. Emily glanced up, smiling when she saw him. "Just about. Give me a minute." As she cleaned up, Nathan walked around the studio, taking in the artwork on the walls. Each piece told a story, not just about the artists who had created them, but about Emily as well, her vision, her passion, and her heart. "You've really built something amazing here," he said, his voice sincere. Emily paused, looking over at him. "It feels surreal sometimes. I never thought I'd get here." Nathan walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You didn't just get here, you earned this. Every bit of it." They left the studio together and decided to walk home instead of taking the car. The evening air was cool, and the city lights shimmered like stars against the dark sky. As they strolled through the quiet streets, Emily noticed that Nathan seemed unusually thoughtful. "Is everything okay?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. Nathan gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "I've been thinking a lot lately. Watching you build the studio, seeing how much joy it brings you, it's made me realize something." "What's that?" "I don't want to spend the rest of my life chasing deals and deadlines. I want something more, something real." Emily stopped walking, turning to face him. "What are you saying, Nathan?" He took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about stepping back from the company, maybe selling part of it, or hiring someone to take over day-to-day operations. I want to focus on things that actually matter to me." Emily stared at him, stunned. Nathan Harper, the man who had once lived for his work, was considering walking away from it. It was a bold move, and one she knew wouldn't be easy for him. "Are you sure? That's a huge decision." Nathan nodded. "I'm sure. I've spent my whole life trying to prove something to people who don't even matter. But you've shown me that there's more to life than power and money. I want to build something meaningful. With you." Emily's eyes filled with emotion. She had never asked Nathan to change for her, but hearing him say these words made her realize just how far he had come. "What would you do if you stepped back?" she asked softly. Nathan shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "I don't know yet. Maybe I'll help you run the studio, or maybe I'll finally take that trip around the world I've always dreamed about, but never had time for." All I know is I want to live, not just exist. Emily reached up, cupping his face in her hands. Whatever you decide, I'll be here. We'll figure it out together. Nathan leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. Thank you, Emily, for everything. They continued walking, the weight of the conversation lingering between them, but instead of feeling heavy, it felt freeing. For the first time in years, Nathan felt like he was in control of his life, not because of his wealth or power, but because he was choosing to live on his own terms. A few days later, Nathan called a meeting with the board of directors at his company. He explained his decision to step back and announced his plan to bring in a new CEO to handle daily operations. While some of the board members were surprised, most of them respected Nathan's choice. He had built the company from the ground up, and if anyone deserved to take a step back, it was him. By the end of the meeting, Nathan felt a sense of relief he hadn't experienced in years. He walked out of the boardroom feeling lighter, as though he had shed the weight of years of pressure and expectation. When he returned home, Emily was waiting for him with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "How did it go?" she asked as he walked through the door. Nathan smiled, taking the glass she offered. "It went well, better than I expected. It feels strange, but in a good way." They sat together on the couch, clinking their glasses in a quiet toast. "To new beginnings," Emily said, her eyes sparkling. "To new beginnings," Nathan echoed, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the wine. As they sipped their drinks, Nathan leaned back, pulling Emily close. They sat in comfortable silence, the future stretching out before them like an open road. There were still uncertainties ahead, but for the first time they both felt ready to face them, together. Whatever came next, they knew one thing for certain. Their lives had changed in ways they never could have predicted, and they wouldn't trade it for anything. In the weeks that followed Nathan's decision to step back from his company, life settled into a new kind of balance. Nathan threw himself into helping Emily with the studio, offering his expertise in managing finances and operations, while she focused on teaching and creating. Together, they found a rhythm that felt right, one built on mutual respect, trust, and a shared dream. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the studio, Emily looked up from the canvas she was painting and caught Nathan's gaze. He was reviewing some paperwork, but there was a softness in his expression that made her heart swell. It was a quiet moment, yet it held so much meaning. This wasn't the life they had envisioned when they first married, but somehow it felt better than anything they could have imagined. Later that evening, as they sat down for dinner at home, Nathan broke the comfortable silence. "I've been thinking, maybe we should take that trip you've always talked about." Emily tilted her head, curious. "What trip?" "The one where we drive across the country, visit small towns, explore new places. You always said you wanted to see more of the world beyond the city." Emily smiled, surprised by the suggestion. "You want to take a road trip? Mr. Always Busy, Always Working wants to hit the road?" Nathan chuckled, shaking his head. "I know it sounds crazy, but I think we could both use a break. Besides, the studio is running smoothly now. Your team can handle things for a few weeks." Emily considered his words, excitement bubbling up inside her. She had dreamed of traveling for years, but life had always gotten in the way. Now, with Nathan by her side and nothing holding them back, it finally felt possible. "Okay," she said, her eyes shining. "Let's do it." A week later, they packed their bags, rented a sleek RV, and set off on their adventure. The first few days were filled with laughter, music, and long conversations as they drove through winding roads and open highways. They stopped at small diners, explored hidden trails, and took countless photos of breathtaking landscapes. One evening, after a long day of hiking in a national park, they sat by a campfire, wrapped in a shared blanket. The sky above them was a canvas of stars, and the air was crisp and fresh. "This is perfect," Emily whispered, resting her head on Nathan's shoulder. "I never thought we'd end up here, like this." Nathan kissed the top of her head. "Neither did I, but I'm glad we did." As they sat in the quiet of the night, Emily thought back to how far they had come, from strangers brought together by a dare, to partners who had built a life filled with love, trust, and adventure. Their journey had been anything but conventional, but it had taught them both something invaluable. Life isn't about where you start, it's about where you choose to go. The next morning, they continued their journey, stopping in a quaint town nestled in the mountains. As they wandered through the charming streets, they stumbled upon a small art gallery featuring works by local artists. Emily was immediately drawn to the place, and as they stepped inside, she felt a familiar sense of wonder. An elderly woman greeted them with a warm smile. "Welcome. Feel free to look around." Emily and Nathan explored the gallery, admiring the diverse range of paintings, sculptures, and crafts. One particular piece caught Emily's eye, a vibrant painting of a tree standing tall against a stormy sky, similar to the one she had painted back in her studio. "That's beautiful," Nathan said, noticing her gaze. "It reminds me of home," Emily replied softly. The gallery owner approached them, noticing Emily's interest in the piece. "That's one of my favorite works," she said kindly. "Are you an artist?" Emily smiled. "Yes, I run a small studio in New York." The woman's eyes lit up. "How wonderful. It's always inspiring to meet fellow artists. If you're ever in town again, we'd love to collaborate on an exhibition." Emily exchanged contact information with the woman, feeling a surge of excitement at the possibility of expanding her art beyond the city. It was another reminder of how much her life had changed and how many new doors had opened since she and Nathan had embarked on this journey together. As they left the gallery and continued exploring the town, Nathan turned to Emily with a thoughtful expression. "You know, I've been thinking maybe we should keep doing things like this. Traveling, finding new places, meeting new people." Emily laughed. "Are you saying you want to become a nomad?" "Not exactly," Nathan said with a grin. "But I like the idea of living without being tied down by expectations. Maybe we don't need a fixed plan. We can keep building our life one step at a time, wherever it takes us." Emily considered his words, her heart filling with gratitude. Nathan had come so far from the man she had first married, the man who had once been consumed by work and wealth. Now he was someone who valued the simple joys of life, someone who had learned to let go of control and embrace the unknown. "I like that idea," she said, taking his hand. "Let's keep writing our story, one chapter at a time." That evening, as they sat by another campfire, Nathan pulled out a small notebook he had bought earlier that day. "What's that?" Emily asked, curious. "A journal," Nathan said, smiling. "I thought we could document our journey, write down the places we visit, the people we meet, and the lessons we learn along the way." Emily's eyes sparkled with excitement. "I love it." Together they began writing, capturing the essence of their adventure in words and sketches. It wasn't just a journal. It was a testament to how far they had come and how far they were willing to go. As the fire crackled and the stars twinkled above them, Emily felt a sense of peace she had never known before. Life was unpredictable, full of twists and turns, but with Nathan by her side, she knew they could face anything. Their journey was far from over, but that was what made it beautiful. They were living, truly living, and every step they took was a step towards something greater, a future built not on wealth or power, but on love, trust, and shared dreams. As their road trip neared its end, Emily and Nathan found themselves in a remote coastal town in Maine. It was a quiet, picturesque place with rocky cliffs overlooking the ocean and quaint cottages lining the streets. They decided to stay for a few days, hoping to soak in the peaceful atmosphere before returning to their lives in New York. One evening, they went for a walk along the beach, the sky above them painted in hues of orange and pink. The wind was gentle, carrying the salty scent of the sea. They strolled in silence, hand in hand, until Nathan suddenly stopped. "I have something I need to tell you," he said, his voice unusually serious. Emily turned to him, her brow furrowing in concern. "What is it?" Nathan took a deep breath, looking out at the endless expanse of water before speaking. "When we got married, I didn't tell you the whole truth. I didn't marry you because I wanted to. I married you on a dare." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Though she had always known their marriage hadn't started on the best terms, hearing those words still stung. She looked at Nathan, searching his face for an explanation. "It was stupid," he continued, his voice filled with regret. "One of my so-called friends dared me to prove that money could buy anything, even a marriage, and I was arrogant enough to take the bet. I thought it was all a game." Emily remained silent, letting him speak. Though pain welled up inside her, she knew this was a moment of truth and she wanted to hear everything. "But then I got to know you," Nathan said, his voice softening, "and everything changed. You weren't like anyone I'd ever met. You didn't care about my money or my status. You cared about real things, family, art, people. You made me see the world differently, made me want to be a better man." He stepped closer, his eyes filled with vulnerability. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. I love you, Emily. Not because of a dare, not because of anything superficial, but because of who you are." Emily felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She had always known Nathan carried secrets, but she hadn't expected this. Still, she could see the sincerity in his eyes, the genuine remorse in his voice. For a moment, she turned away, walking a few steps toward the water. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, hurt, confusion, but beneath it all, there was something stronger: love. Despite everything, she loved Nathan. She had seen him change, seen him become a man capable of kindness, empathy, and real love. Turning back to face him, she took a deep breath. "What you did was wrong, Nathan." It hurt to hear that this started as a game, but people make mistakes. What matters is what they do after those mistakes. Nathan's shoulders relaxed slightly, hope flickering in his eyes. "So, where does that leave us?" Emily stepped closer, placing a hand on his cheek. "It leaves us here now. You've changed, Nathan. You're not the same man who made that bet. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that life isn't perfect. It's messy, it's painful, but it's also beautiful." Nathan covered her hand with his heart pounding with a mix of relief and emotion. "You mean you're willing to give me a chance?" Emily smiled softly, tears glistening in her eyes. "I already have. Every day we've spent together, I've seen the real you, the man you've become, and that's the man I love." Nathan pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her as though afraid she might disappear. The sound of the waves filled the air around them, but all he could hear was the steady beat of her heart against his chest. "I promise you," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion, "I'll never take you for granted again. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." Emily leaned back slightly, meeting his gaze. "We don't need perfect promises, Nathan. We just need to keep choosing each other, every day." As the sun dipped below the horizon, they stood there on the beach, wrapped in each other's arms. The truth had finally been laid bare, and though it had hurt, it had also brought them closer. They had faced the storm, and together, they had come out stronger. The next morning, they packed their things and began the drive back to New York. But something felt different, lighter. They weren't returning to the same life they had left behind. They were returning as partners, ready to build a future based on trust and love. Back in the city, life resumed its rhythm, but it was no longer the same. Nathan, true to his word, stepped back from his company and took on a more supportive role, focusing on personal growth and helping Emily with the studio. Emily continued to pour her heart into her art, finding joy in teaching and creating. One evening, a few months later, they hosted an exhibition at the studio, showcasing not only Emily's work, but also pieces from her students and other local artists. As the guests mingled and admired the artwork, Nathan stood by Emily's side, his arm wrapped around her waist. "This is just the beginning," he whispered, glancing around the room. Emily smiled, leaning into him. "It is, and I can't wait to see where it takes us." Nathan kissed her temple, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. Their journey had started as something false, built on a dare and surrounded by lies. But through love, honesty, and perseverance, they had turned it into something real, something worth fighting for. As the night went on and the studio buzzed with life, Emily and Nathan knew that their story was far from over. There would be more challenges, more mistakes, and more moments of doubt. But as long as they had each other, they were ready to face whatever came next. Because real love, they had learned, isn't perfect. It's flawed, messy, and unpredictable. But it's also worth every risk, every pain, and every leap of faith. And so, with hearts full of hope and hands clasped tightly together, they embraced the future, ready to write the next chapter of their extraordinary story. One day, one step, one moment at a time. Months passed, and life continued to unfold in beautiful, unexpected ways for Emily and Nathan. The once distant couple had now grown into a strong partnership, built on love, trust, and mutual understanding. Their lives were no longer defined by wealth or status, but by the moments they shared and the dreams they nurtured together. The art studio flourished, becoming a beacon of creativity in the heart of New York City. Emily found immense joy in teaching her students, watching them grow not just as artists, but as individuals. Each new class brought fresh challenges and inspiration, and with Nathan by her side, she felt more confident than ever. Nathan, too, found fulfillment in this new chapter of his life. He continued to work part-time with his company, offering guidance when needed but no longer allowing it to consume him. Instead, he dedicated most of his time to exploring new passions, travel, philanthropy, and helping Emily with her growing art community. He had traded the cold, high-stakes world of corporate power for something far more rewarding, a life filled with meaning and connection. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of their penthouse, watching the city lights twinkle below, Nathan turned to Emily with a thoughtful expression. Do you ever think about how it all started? How unlikely this was? Emily smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. All the time. It's crazy to think that something so shallow, a dare, led us here. But I wouldn't change a thing. Every mistake, every challenge brought us to this moment. Nathan nodded, wrapping an arm around her. You changed me, Emily. You made me see the world differently. I used to think that love was just something people said, something that didn't really matter, but now I know it's the only thing that does. Emily looked up at him, her eyes shining with emotion. You didn't just change for me, Nathan. You changed because you wanted to, and that's why I love you. They sat in silence for a while, content in the warmth of each other's presence. The journey they had taken, filled with twists, pain, and growth, had led them to a place they never thought they'd reach. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, and that made it even more precious. As the night deepened, Emily reached for Nathan's hand. So, what's next for us? Nathan chuckled softly. Whatever we want. We've built a life we love, and now we get to live it. One day at a time. Emily smiled, squeezing his hand. I like the sound of that. Over the following years, they continued to grow together. They traveled to places they had only dreamed of, created memories that would last a lifetime, and faced every new challenge as a team. Their love, once born out of something false, had become something true, something worth cherishing. One particularly memorable moment came when they decided to open a second studio, this time in a quiet coastal town similar to the one they had visited during their road trip. It became a retreat for artists from all walks of life, a place where creativity flourished and dreams were born. Emily poured her heart into it, and Nathan, as always, stood by her side, supporting her in every way he could. Their journey wasn't perfect. There were still disagreements, moments of doubt, and unexpected setbacks. But through it all, they remained committed to each other, choosing love over pride, understanding over judgment. On the night of their 5th wedding anniversary, they hosted a private gathering at the original studio, surrounded by close friends, family, and students. Claire, Emily's mother, stood proudly beside her daughter, while Nathan's old friends, once skeptical of their union, marveled at the transformation they had witnessed. As the evening drew to a close, Nathan raised a toast. To the past that brought us here, the present we're living, and the future we'll create together. Emily smiled, her heart full of gratitude. Their story, once improbable, had become a testament to the power of love, growth, and second chances. They had started as strangers, bound by a dare, but had ended up as partners, bound by something far stronger, a love they had built, step by step, through every trial and triumph. That night, as they stood on the balcony once more, Emily leaned into Nathan, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her. I can't wait to see where life takes us next. Nathan kissed the top of her head, smiling. Wherever it is, we'll face it together. Because in the end, that was what truly mattered, not the wealth, the success, or the perfection they had once thought they needed, but the love they had found in each other. It was messy, beautiful, and real, and that was more than enough. And so, this emotional story comes to an end, showing us that true love isn't born from a perfect fairy tale, but from a journey filled with challenges, growth, and transformation. Emily and Nathan proved that even when something starts in an unlikely way, it's possible to build something real and lasting through dedication, patience, and daily choices. This story leaves us with an important lesson. It doesn't matter how life begins or the mistakes we make along the way. What truly matters is what we choose to do from now on, moving forward, learning, and striving to be better for those we love. If this story moved you in any way, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell to receive more emotional stories like this one. And of course, share it with someone who needs a reminder that love, even in the most unexpected situations, can change everything. Stay tuned, because in our next video, we'll bring another story full of emotions, twists, and surprising endings. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.